The siren washed the night in blue and red, fine rain slicing through the avenue like glass needles. I approached slowly, one hand open, the other resting on my holster. Good evening. License and registration. The window rolled down with a creak, and first came the smell of gasoline and Marlboro. Then, the driver's eyes, dark, steady, as if he already knew the answer to every question. My radio crackled on my shoulder, plate possibly cloned. My flashlight swept over the dashboard, the gear shift, his hand half hidden. And then came the phrase, low, intimate, impossible. Easy, little wolf. The world froze. Little wolf. That was what my father used to call me when I was 8 and afraid of the dark. No one else. The asphalt vanished beneath my feet. My finger locked on the trigger, my heart trapped in the past. Who are you? How do you know that name? In the rearview mirror, a keychain swung, a tiny medal of St. George, just like my father's. And in the back seat, a shadow stirred. The radio's voice grew sharper. Attention! Vehicle connected to a kidnapping. He smirked. We need to talk. The engine roared. I took one step forward, and he shifted into first gear. I was born and raised on the outskirts of São Paulo, in streets that never forgave the naive and never sheltered the weak. Early on, I learned that life is built on choices we carry like scars. My father was a military police officer for 20 years, and he taught me, more often with his stern gaze than with words, that honor isn't a medal pinned to your chest. It's the ability to face the mirror when no one else is watching. He died too soon, the victim of an ambush that was never fully explained, leaving a hole in me that never healed. He was the one who called me Little Wolf, reminding me that no matter how small I was, I should always walk in a pack, never alone, because loneliness in war is a death sentence. I keep that nickname buried deep inside me like a secret code, hidden so well that not even my fellow officers know it exists. My mother, after his death, sank into silence, and I learned to fend for myself. I never had a youth filled with parties or carefree dreams. I had sleepless nights studying for exams, endless days juggling odd jobs, all to follow in my father's shadow. I joined the civil police with my chest full of courage and my mind full of doubts. I always wanted to be more than the uniform, more than the badge, but with each case, with each body stretched out on the ground, I realized the line between justice and vengeance is thinner than most imagine. I am no hero. I'm a man marked by the weight of what I've seen, what I've done, and what I've failed to do. The smell of gunpowder clings to my hands even at home, and my dreams rarely bring peace. My colleagues say I'm cold, calculating, but the coldness is just a mask. Inside, I feel every scream, every mother's cry at her child's grave, every orphaned child left behind. I try not to show it, because in this line of work, if you bleed inside, the enemy can smell it, but no vest protects you from memory. I've lost friends in poorly planned operations. I've pulled the trigger on someone who, for a split second, reminded me of my younger brother. These marks don't show up in reports, but they eat away at you slowly. The uniform doesn't just weigh on your shoulders, it weighs on your conscience, on your soul. Even so, I wake up every day, strap on the holster, and head out. Because I know that if I quit, someone else might fall in my place. I know I carry a promise to my father, not to let anger blind me, not to confuse justice with hate. And until now, I've tried to honor that, even when the world insists on testing me. I became a police officer not to be a headline hero, but to be the invisible shield separating innocent families from the darkness lurking at every corner of this city. But in that instant, when I heard Little Wolf escape a stranger's lips, all the armor I had built over the years began to crack. Because suddenly I realized my past wasn't buried. It was alive, behind the wheel of a suspicious car, staring at me as if it had just risen from the dead. It was supposed to be a routine night of patrol, the kind of duty that, in theory, keeps the city within a certain sense of order, but, in practice, can turn unpredictable at any moment. The radio crackled at 9:47 p.m., reporting a possible cloned vehicle moving through the South Zone, allegedly used in at least 2 armed robberies the previous week. There was no urgency to hit the siren, no planned blockade, just the order to step up inspections and keep an eye out for suspicious cars. That was it. A routine checkpoint on a busy avenue, flashing lights, orange cones lined up, the theater of security that the public sees as mundane, but we know it can become tragedy in seconds. Every driver slowing down is a question mark. Every glance in the rearview mirror could carry an untold story. I had already stopped. 4 cars that night. A taxi with a drunk passenger, a rideshare driver complaining about the heat and delays, a family returning from the market with kids asleep in the back seat. All routine. But the radio alert wouldn't leave my mind. Cloned plate, suspicion of a kidnapping, possible ties to organized crime. None of that matched routine, and we know how to recognize when the silence of the night is nothing more than a curtain hiding something bigger. The smell of gasoline, the constant roar of modified mufflers, the rain tapping against our vests. Every detail was a reminder that calm is always treacherous. Then, amid the uneven traffic, that dark sedan appeared, windows slightly fogged, a plate that partially matched the description we had. The vehicle slowed almost too perfectly, as if it knew exactly where to stop. I signaled with my hand, flashlight steady, cutting through the rain as it lit up the driver's face. He didn't hesitate, pulled over cleanly, turned off the headlights, but kept the engine running. That detail didn't escape me. For anyone else, it was just another car at a checkpoint. For me, it was a pulsing question in the air. The radio crackled again. Partial confirmation. Vehicle matches one used in yesterday's incident. Suspected involvement in local businessman kidnapping. Stay alert. My pulse spiked, but my body stuck to the script. My voice was trained to sound firm, neutral, hiding the unease gnawing at me. Good evening, license and registration, please. That's when normality began to unravel. The window rolled down slowly, his face revealed in fragments by the flashing patrol lights. It wasn't just the fixed stare, not just the half smile that didn't belong there. It was the exaggerated calm, like he had been waiting for me. Up until that second, it was just another stop out of the dozens I'd carried out over the years. But the scene carried a strangeness I couldn't explain. The radio whispered, "Suspect." The rain seemed to swallow the rest of the world, and something deep inside me screamed there was more at stake. I didn't yet know that in just seconds, the word he would choose to speak would flip my entire universe upside down. Because the initial call wasn't about a cloned car or organized crime. It was about me, about my past being ripped from the grave and shoved right in front of me. And I'd only realize it when I heard that forbidden nickname cut through the air like a bullet. Little Wolf. The rain grew heavier when we followed the car to the spot where it finally decided to stop, just a few meters from a narrow, poorly lit street, the kind that seems to swallow every trace of life. That location wasn't part of the checkpoint route, but there was no choice. He pulled over there, and I had to follow. The flashing lights of the patrol car reflected off graffitied walls, creating shadows that moved like ghosts. The neighborhood carried that strange mix of abandonment and survival, where children play on cracked sidewalks during the day, and at night, only the bold dare to walk through. It wasn't a strategic point, not the kind of corner where you'd stage an operation. It was a hole in the map, a forgotten place, perfect for someone who didn't want to be found. I stepped out of the car with my senses sharpened. The cold from the wet asphalt cut through my boots, and each step seemed louder than it should. The sedan's engine still rumbled low, like a heart unsure whether to race or stop altogether. The smell of gasoline mixed with the damp air, dragging me back to memories of other shifts, other streets, other deaths. My hand went instinctively to the holster, but my mind was split in two. Half alert as a cop, half prisoner of that word still pounding in my skull. Little Wolf. It was as if the street, the walls, even the air conspired to hurl me back into childhood, to nights when my father taught me not to fear the dark. But now, that darkness had a face, a voice, and it was sitting inside a suspicious car. I scanned the surroundings. The houses were shut tight, doors reinforced with bars, curtains closed like eyelids refusing to see. No witnesses, No curious neighbors, only the suffocating silence that often comes before tragedy. The radio on my belt hissed with interference, as if even the frequency itself was afraid to stay clear. For the first time in a long while, I felt the crushing loneliness of the job. It was just me, my partner at the ready, and a the man who seemed to know the ghosts of my life. My first impression of that place was pure ambush. A narrow alley behind the car led to a side street, a perfect escape route. The streetlights flickered on and off, turning the scene into something surreal, almost like a stage waiting for its macabre performance. Puddles on the ground reflected the patrol lights, but twisted them into distorted images, as if reality itself was cracking into pieces. I knew then this wasn't just about paperwork, or a cloned plate, or even a kidnapping. There was something bigger, something personal, and fate had chosen to reveal it here on this forgotten street. My partner whispered into the radio calling for backup, but my thoughts were no longer tethered only to procedure. As I walked closer to the sedan, flashlight in hand, I felt every detail of the scene laced with foreboding. The drip from a broken gutter, the rustle of a plastic bag in the corner, the distant cry of a cat hiding in the shadows. To anyone else, they were meaningless sounds. To me, they screamed that the ground was about to give way. Deep down, I already knew. When he spoke again, it wouldn't be about his car or his documents. It would be about tearing open the door between my present and my past. That place, with its improvised stage-like atmosphere, had become the setting where my destiny would be tested. And as I stood there before the half-open car door, blinded for a second by the glare of my own flashlight, I was certain of one thing. Nothing that night would be just another routine stop, because the place he chose wasn't coincidence. It was a trap, not for my job, but for my life story itself. The moment the car door swung open was like the snap of an invisible trigger. The driver stepped out slowly, unhurried, as if he were in complete control of the scene. The metallic thud of the door echoed through the empty street, sounding far louder than it should have. He raised his hands to chest level, but it wasn't a clear sign of surrender. It was calculated, almost theatrical, like someone introducing himself before the show begins. Rain slid down his face, and that faint, unsettling smile never left. I aimed my flashlight straight into his eyes while my other hand gripped my weapon tight. Hands where I can see them, away from your body. My voice came out steady, but inside I was trembling, because even before any suspicious move, the sound of that word he'd spoken minutes earlier still corroded. Me, Little Wolf. From the back seat, something shifted. My pupils widened instinctively, straining to catch detail inside the dark interior. I saw what looked like a figure, hunched shoulders, restrained movements, maybe a hostage. My radio hissed on my shoulder with a voice from command. Full confirmation. Vehicle tied to kidnapping. Priority 1. My heart pounded hard, but my body stayed locked in protocol. Behind me, my partner was already in firing stance, ready for whatever came next. I was standing on a minefield. One wrong word, one wrong move, and the entire scene could explode. Then the driver spoke, in that same unsettling calm. No need for this, Little Wolf. I came to you. I'm not your enemy. His words were gasoline on an open flame. How did he know? How dare he use the name only my father had ever called me? My throat went dry, but I held my stance. I stepped closer, eyes fixed on his, searching for answers. The tension was suffocating, so thick it was as if even the rain had stopped mid-air. Suddenly, a sharp movement in the back seat. The shadow inside fought against the restraints, enough to set every nerve on fire. Get out! Now! Hands where I can see them! I barked, my voice cutting through the alley like a blade. The driver turned his head toward the back, and in that fleeting glance between him and the hidden passenger, I understood there was a deeper connection here. It wasn't just a criminal and a victim. There was something more, something pulling me into their web whether I wanted it or not. My next move was pure instinct. I sidestepped for better cover, weapon aimed, flashlight tearing through the dark interior. What I saw froze my blood. A woman sat bound, wrists taped, a rag on her lap. Her eyes screamed for help. Behind me, my partner shouted, "Hostage confirmed!" Adrenaline surged through me, every muscle tight, every heartbeat like a countdown. But the man didn't panic. He lifted his hands higher and said with disturbing serenity, "She isn't who you think she is. But if you want to save her, you'll have to listen to me." It was a twisted game, a psychological trap that put me at war with my own code. Protocol was clear: neutralize the threat, secure the hostage. But the way he spoke, the eerie calm, made it feel like every move of mine had already been anticipated in his script. The distant wail of another patrol car broke the moment. Backup was arriving, tires screeching, more flashing lights flooding the narrow street. The scene tightened like a noose. More voices on the radio, more guns trained, more pressure crushing me from all sides. And I, caught in the middle, realized I was about to cross an invisible line. The same line my father had warned me about so many times. The action was no longer just tactical. It had become personal, visceral. The hostage's eyes begged me. The driver's smirk told me he knew secrets I wasn't supposed to uncover. Time was shattering around me, every second slicing me open. And I knew. From here, there was no turning back. That alley had turned into an arena. I stood there, breath ragged, finger tight on the trigger, and finally understood. This night wasn't about following protocol. It was about facing my past, my loyalty, and the truth locked inside the man who dared to call me Little Wolf. The instant I finally saw her face clearly, it was like taking a punch straight to the gut. My flashlight cut across the woman in the back seat, and my first reaction was automatic. Classify, assess, just another hostage profile. But she wasn't just anyone. Her features, even with her hair wet and clinging to her skin, struck me like a memory I didn't know I carried. The same sharp gaze, the same shape of the jaw. I had seen those traits before, in the few old photos that survived from my father's youth. For a moment, the world stopped. It seemed impossible, and yet there it was. The woman bound in the back seat carried the same blood as me. My heart raced, but everything around me seemed to slow down. The metallic taste of adrenaline filled my mouth, and one single question pounded in my head. How could she be here? The driver caught my reaction and smiled. Not a triumphant smile, but one of revelation. He knew he had hit me where it hurt most. "Now you see, Little Wolf," he said in that calm, almost paternal tone. "None of this is coincidence. She's your sister." The ground caved beneath me. My sister? I had no sister. I grew up alone, too young when I lost my father, convinced that my world was only me, my mother, and fragments of memories. But staring into her eyes that were terrified yet somehow familiar, I knew I couldn't deny it. It was like looking into a warped mirror of the past. Behind me, my partner shouted, "What's the situation? Are we moving or not?" Pressure mounted. Backup lights painted the alley, voices barked through the radio demanding immediate action. But none of that mattered anymore. For me, there were only three things in that moment: the driver, the woman, and the word sister pounding in my skull. He stepped forward slowly, hands still raised, voice unnervingly confident. "Your father never told you everything. He made choices, and now you're paying the price for them." Rage burned inside me. Every memory of my father, every lesson, every heavy silence, every unanswered question suddenly carried new meaning. Had he really hidden something this big from me? Could his death be tied to her, to this man, to this cursed story unraveling in front of me? The woman tried to speak, but the tape muffled her. Without thinking, I lunged forward and ripped it off, ignoring procedure, ignoring the risk. She gasped for breath, then whispered, trembling, "He's not lying. I am your sister." My mind went blank. No training prepares you for that kind of blow. My partner screamed behind me, weapon cocked, asking for authorization to fire. The radio barked in my ear, command demanding a report. But nothing felt real. The line between victim and perpetrator, truth and manipulation, past and present, all of it blurred into chaos. Then the driver delivered the final strike. "You can arrest me now, but if you do, you'll never know who killed your father. You'll never understand who betrayed him, and she she'll pay the price. The world around me erupted into noise. Sirens wailing, orders shouted, rain pounding against car hoods. But inside there was only silence, the kind of silence that crushes convictions. The discovery hit me with brutal force. I wasn't just facing a criminal and a hostage. I was staring into the hidden truth of my own life. And for the first time, I was terrified not of how the operation would end, but of what this revelation would do to me. Because in that moment, I realized I wasn't just a cop anymore. I was a son. I was a brother. I was part of a dirty story I never asked to carry. With my gun trembling in my hands, I understood. My mission wasn't only to save a hostage. It was to save myself from the abyss opening beneath my feet. I've been in situations where death breathed down my neck, where the danger was so tangible it felt like it materialized right in front of me. I've faced armed criminals, seen innocents caught in crossfire, made split-second choices between pulling the trigger or holding back. But nothing, absolutely nothing, compared to what I felt that night. The weight wasn't only in my holster, nor in the gun pointed at that man. The weight was inside me. Because the revelation that the woman in the back seat could be my sister shattered the logic I had built over years in uniform. All my life, I clung to a code of honor. Never let emotions interfere with the badge, never allow blood ties to outweigh the law. But there she was, tied up, terrified, with eyes so much like my father's, and that code began to crack. Childhood memories slammed into me. I remembered asking my father why he came home so late, why he disappeared for days, why silence always fell whenever I asked about his past. He would ruffle my hair, call me little wolf, and deflect. I thought it was just the harshness of police life, the secrets of the job. But now each silence carried a different weight. Maybe it wasn't about duty. Maybe it was about a hidden life, a truth buried to protect me. And if that woman was truly my sister, what did that say about the man I had spent my whole life admiring? The radio barked orders. My partner yelled for a decision, but they all felt miles away. Inside me was a battle no one could see. On one side stood the cop, cold, trained, ready to neutralize the threat and secure the hostage. On the other stood the son and the man, wounded, confused, unable to ignore the possibility that the woman might be family. How do you act when the line between justice and blood dissolves right before your eyes? My hand trembled on the trigger, and that terrified me more than any gun ever pointed at me. I had never trembled on duty. My every movement had always been clear, precise, controlled. But now, doubt was an invisible enemy, and it was dominating me. If I fired, I'd eliminate the threat but lose forever the chance to uncover the truth about my father. If I hesitated, I risked her life, the life of someone who could share my blood. Then came the guilt. Guilt for thinking more about myself than about her safety. Guilt for resenting my father for hiding this truth. Guilt for questioning the badge I had carried for so many years. I once believed wearing the uniform meant carrying a responsibility bigger than my own life. But for the first time, that belief fractured. Was I failing, not only as a cop, but also as a son, as a man? Memories of my father's funeral rushed in, the coffin draped in the flag, fellow officers saluting, my mother silent, and me swearing I would honor his memory. Now that oath felt like a noose. How could I honor a man who might have hidden a daughter from me? How could I reconcile the hero I had worshipped with the secret now staring back at me? Seconds dragged into eternities. The driver watched me closely, almost amused by my internal struggle. He knew exactly where to strike, and I realized I wasn't just fighting a criminal. I was fighting myself, the anger, the pain, the desperate need for answers. The radio screamed again, demanding immediate action. My partner shouted, "Either you act or I will." And at that moment, I saw the true weight of my conflict. No choice was free of consequences. I could save her life but bury the truth forever. I could follow protocol and live haunted by doubts that would eat me alive. I could try to be both cop and brother, but deep down, I knew that was impossible. The war inside me felt like chains. I wasn't just standing in front of a suspect. I was staring at my own fragility, and the only certainty I had was that no matter what choice I made, I would never be the same again. Time felt frozen, but every second crushed me like a ton of weight. The alley was flooded with patrol lights. Radios screamed for a clear command. My heartbeat pounded so hard it hurt. The driver stood calm, that crooked smile never leaving his face, as if the whole scene were his stage. Behind him, the woman, who moments before had whispered she was my sister, gasped for breath, her eyes pleading with me to act. My partner shouted at my side, desperate for me to give the final order, and there I was, weapons steady in my hands, realizing there was no more room for hesitation. The moment of decision had arrived. It didn't matter how much the past weighed on me, didn't matter how deeply doubt was tearing at me. A choice had to be made, one that would not only decide the outcome of this case, but also the course of my entire life. The options were merciless. If I pulled the trigger, I'd eliminate the threat, uphold my duty, and save the woman, but I'd also bury with him any chance of learning the truth about my father, about her, about myself. If I hesitated, I risked her life and everyone else's, including mine. And if I gave in to the temptation to listen to him, I risked being seen as weak, compromised, a cop who let the enemy manipulate his heart over his head. I took a breath. The world spun slower. And then my father's words came back to me, from one of the rare times he let his guard down. The uniform is heavy, little wolf, but the decision will always weigh more. One day you'll have to choose between what is right and what is necessary. I never really understood what he meant, until now. I stepped closer to the driver, weapon aimed at his chest. My voice came out hard, though I was breaking inside. Let her go, now. The command rang through the alley, but he didn't move. He tilted his head, calm as ever. You don't get it. If I let her go, it all ends. You'll never know who really killed your father. The words hit me like an invisible shot. My partner was on the edge, finger tight on the trigger. I knew that if I didn't act, he would. So I made the choice that would change everything. I raised my free hand toward him, signaling to hold fire. It wasn't surrender to the suspect, and it wasn't betrayal of protocol. It was a conscious choice, risky, reckless even, that I needed to hear the truth. I needed to understand. The silence that followed was suffocating. Backup officers froze, waiting on my next move. The entire alley seemed to hold its breath. Then the driver lowered his hands slowly, locking his eyes on mine. You chose to listen. Now there's no turning back. He opened the rear door, pulled the woman out, and kept her close to his body, half hostage, half shield, proof he was still in control. But then she looked at me, and in a voice so faint it barely reached my ears, she whispered, "He isn't who he says he is. Be careful." The ground beneath me shifted again. My decision hadn't freed me. It had opened another wound. Because now it wasn't just about choosing between duty and blood. It was about deciding who to believe. And that was the most dangerous choice of all. The operation wasn't over. The real confrontation was only beginning. And deep down, I knew. Whatever step I took from this moment on could turn me from cop to traitor, from hero to accomplice, from son to orphan all over again. The voices around me blurred into a distant hum, like I was hearing everything underwater. My signal to my partner had worked. He held his fire, steady but tense. The other patrol cars tightened. The perimeter, their flashing red and blue lights carving restless shadows across the graffiti-stained walls. The command center barked through the radio, demanding a status update. I forced my voice into a controlled tone, though inside I was chaos. Situation developing. Hostage outside the vehicle. Suspect still in control, awaiting my directive. The consequences of my choice fell heavy and immediate. First came the distrust in my colleagues' eyes. They were trained to act swiftly, to neutralize threats with no hesitation. For them, my decision to pause and listen wasn't strategy. It was anomaly, almost betrayal. I could feel it in the quick glances, the furrowed brows, the weight of their silence. They didn't understand that the battlefield had shifted inside me, that this wasn't just another arrest. To them, it was risk, To me, it was necessity. From there, the scene escalated. Reinforcements arrived. Officers took defensive positions, rifles aimed at every possible escape route. A negotiator was requested, though none had arrived yet. The operation was being reclassified, moving from a simple stop to a full-blown crisis. I knew the longer it dragged, the more eyes would turn toward me, and the harder it would be to justify my hesitation. Meanwhile, the woman, still shaking, still caught between fear and exhaustion, was pulled a few meters away by another officer. She was wrapped in a thermal blanket, her wrists freed, but her gaze never left mine. In it, I saw more than the terror of a hostage. I saw recognition, a plea, something unspoken that tied me to her in a way no report could capture. I wanted to go to her, to ask, to confirm, but duty held me back. Chains invisible yet unbreakable. Then came the paperwork. The machine of bureaucracy already spinning before the night was even over. Detectives scribbled notes. Supervisors whispered orders. Radio chatter filled with requests for background checks. The vehicle's record, the suspect's past, surveillance from nearby streets. Everything was being cataloged. And I realized, with a sharp ache in my chest, that soon this story would belong to the institution. Every secret, every word whispered that night, risked being dissected under fluorescent lights. The weight of that truth pressed down hardest when an older investigator approached, notebook in hand, eyes sharp. "Report the events, officer," he demanded. My throat clenched. Do I tell him the man called me Little Wolf? Do I say the woman claimed to be my sister? Do I expose the cracks in my father's legacy? No, I couldn't. Not yet. So I delivered the facts, stripped and polished while hiding the storm. Around us, the neighborhood stirred. Curtains shifted behind barred windows. Cell phones appeared at corners, recording the flashing lights. Soon, the incident would spill into the world. WhatsApp groups, social media feeds, neighborhood rumors. And what had started as a private wound in me could easily turn into public spectacle. That possibility terrified me more than the guns in play. By the time the suspect was secured and the woman escorted towards safety, I already felt the aftermath setting in. My choice had bought me minutes, maybe answers, but it had cost me trust, procedure, and the illusion of control. The operation wasn't ending. It was unraveling into something larger, something personal and political at once. And as the evidence was gathered, as orders were shouted, as the night crept toward morning, I realized the heaviest consequence of all. The case would be closed on paper, but wide open inside me, because nothing in the official report would mention that I wasn't just confronting a criminal. I was confronting the fractures of my own past, and every step forward from here would demand I choose between protecting the truth or exposing it to the world. The rain had turned into a fine drizzle when the man, now in handcuffs, was sat down on the curb, lit by the rotating glow of red and blue from the patrol. Cars, officers surrounded him, some scribbling notes, others standing guard, weapons still at the ready in case he tried something reckless. A few meters away, the hostage, no, the woman who claimed to be my sister, was wrapped in a blanket, trembling under the care of a female officer. To everyone else, this was wrapping up. A kidnapping thwarted, a suspect contained, a victim rescued. But for me, nothing was over. I needed to speak to him. I walked forward, ignoring the sidelong glances from colleagues. One senior investigator tried to stop me with a raised hand, but I pushed past with a look that said I wasn't asking permission. I crouched on the wet pavement in front of him, water streaming between us like a dark line. He looked up at me and smiled, as if he'd been waiting for this moment all along. "You already know, Little Wolf. You just haven't accepted it yet." My jaw clenched so tight it hurt. Rage flared in me, but so did something else, an almost magnetic pull toward whatever truth he carried. He had struck exactly where I was weakest, and he knew it. "Who are you? What do you know about my father?" I demanded. His expression shifted, losing a bit of the mocking edge. For a heartbeat, it was almost human. "I was his partner, not just on the job, but in the life that came before yours. Your father wasn't only the hero you worship. He made choices. He had another family before yours, and from that family came her. He tilted his head toward the woman still shivering. Under the blanket, the air left my lungs. You're saying she's your sister, and the silence your father carried all his life was to protect you both, to protect from men like me who knew too much. My pulse thundered so loud I could barely hear the rain. I wanted to deny it, to call it a sick ploy, but the way her eyes clung to mine, the way something inside me recognized her, it made denial impossible. Why now? I snapped. Why risk her life? Why drag me into this? He sighed, his shoulders dropping, chains clinking softly. Because the man who killed your father is closer than you think, and because her life, your lives, are still in danger. I didn't come to kidnap. I came to expose. But it had to be like this. Otherwise, you would never have looked me in the eye, never listened. Every word felt like a bullet, tearing through the picture I'd carried of my father for years. The coffin draped in a flag, the flawless hero I'd sworn to honor, now fractured by a hidden past I'd never been meant to see. I turned to the woman. She met my gaze, tears brimming, and whispered with a shaky voice, "He isn't lying. I've looked for you all my life." My partner stormed closer, his patience gone. "Enough. We're done here. We're taking him in." But I lifted my hand, demanding another moment. There was more I had to hear. I looked back at the man. "Why do you call me Little Wolf?" His smile returned, smaller this time. "Because I was there. I heard it. I knew your father better than you think. He loved you, but his love was divided. And if you want answers, you'll have to follow that trail." A chill ripped through me. This wasn't just about crime anymore. This was about who my father really was, and who I was because of him. The officers finally pulled him up, escorting him away. But I stayed frozen, staring at the ground, because even though the operation was over, I knew my life had just been cracked open. That conversation had shifted everything. I wasn't just a cop anymore. I was a son chasing the truth, a brother learning to exist, a man standing at the threshold of a war that had only just begun. And I realized nothing in the official report would ever capture the weight of what he had told me. The real case, the one that mattered, had only just started. That night ended with everyone taken away in separate cars, each of us heading toward a different destiny written in crooked lines. But for me, nothing truly ended. What remained was silence inside my head, the kind that doesn't depend on the absence of sound, but on the implosion within. I'd lived through countless operations before, some marked by brutal violence, others by losses that still haunt me. But I had never felt life rip me so violently away from the solid ground I thought I stood on. And the truth is, I wasn't prepared. In the days that followed, I did my duty. I filled out reports, gave statements, described the stop, the suspect's behavior, the condition of the hostage. Every line I wrote was that of a professional, cold, technical, precise. But hidden between the words were the cracks of the man I really was. I concealed that the woman had eyes like my father's. I concealed that the suspect called me by a nickname buried with him. I concealed that my heart screamed louder than any training every time I replayed the scene in my mind. How could I put into writing that this wasn't just another case? That it was also the unveiling of a family torn in two, a life built on secrets? It was during those nights of reflection that I began to realize who I truly was. For years, I had believed the uniform defined me, that it was my shield, my compass, my foundation. But the uniform is just fabric and metal. What really carried me forward were the memories of my father, the image of the hero I had created, the silent oath to honor his name. And when that image shattered, what was left was a man caught between two truths: the father who raised me, and the father who may have hidden a daughter from me. The transformation didn't happen overnight. First came anger. Anger at having been deceived, at being dragged into something I never asked for, at realizing my father's legacy might not be what I thought. Then came fear. Fear of uncovering that my whole life was built on a lie. Fear of not being strong enough to face it. Fear of losing myself in the search for answers. But eventually, acceptance took root. Acceptance that I wasn't just a cop. I was a son. I was a brother. I was a man who had to face the truth, no matter how much it hurt. Each sleepless night, replaying that alley in my head, I understood that the real enemy wasn't the man in handcuffs. It wasn't even the crime he represented. The real enemy was inside me, the fear of looking in the mirror and not knowing who I really was. Slowly, that enemy reshaped me. I began to see the streets differently, to realize that not everything is black and white. There are gray areas that no report will ever capture, lives and stories too complex to fit in clean categories of good or evil. Now, when I look at myself in the mirror, I no longer see only the officer who swore to uphold the law. I see the son searching for answers, the brother trying to exist, the man stripped of illusions and forced to face reality as it is. That change didn't make me weaker. If anything, it made me human. And maybe being human is the only way to be truly just. That case carved an abyss inside me, but it also gave me a bridge. The chance to rebuild myself, not only as a cop, but as someone who finally accepts that the truth may hurt, but it also sets us free. And that's when I realized my life would never be the same again. Because that rainy alley didn't just end with me handcuffing a suspect. It ended with me shackled to my own story. And now, breaking those chains will be the hardest mission I've ever faced. The official conclusion of the case was cold, bureaucratic, almost indifferent to the storm that had torn through me. On paper, it said that a routine checkpoint had led to the capture of a suspect linked to a kidnapping, with the victim rescued safely and sent for medical care. The report detailed everything by the book: time of the stop, positions of the patrol cars, the suspect's movements, the condition of the hostage, the arrest procedure. All neat, all within protocol. But hidden between the lines was the real weight of that night. Family secrets revealed, memories shattered, and a future so uncertain it didn't fit in any form or file. In practice, the case ended with the suspect being taken to the station. In handcuffs, he carried the same disturbing calm as before, like he had achieved exactly what he wanted: to plant doubt inside me. He didn't resist, didn't cause a scene, didn't pose a threat beyond his sharp words, which still echoed in my ears. For my colleagues, it was a clean victory. No casualties, no mistakes, another success for the books. For me, it was the beginning of a war I wasn't sure I had the strength to fight. The victim, or rather the woman who claimed to be my sister, was escorted to psychological support and later released under supervision. No one questioned her status as a hostage. Everything looked legitimate to the eyes of the institution. But what no one else recorded, what no one else heard, was her whisper in that alley. "I've looked for you my whole life." That phrase haunted me like an invisible brand, something that could never be filed. Away with the evidence. On the ride back, the atmosphere was thick with unspoken judgment. My partner barely spoke, only throwing me quick, suspicious glances. He had seen my hesitation, watched me signal to hold fire, heard me give space for the suspect to talk. To him, that was too much risk, too much doubt. We both knew word of this would reach command. At best, I'd be questioned. At worst, investigated. But none of that scared me as much as the question gnawing at me. Who was I now after all I had heard? Hours bled into interrogation rooms, statements, endless paperwork. My superiors pressed me about the negotiation, why it dragged, why I hadn't authorized immediate action. I leaned on technical answers: de-escalation to protect the hostage, preserving intelligence, minimizing risk. All true, but not the whole truth. The real truth, that the suspect called me by a name only my father knew, that the hostage might be my sister, stayed locked inside. I wasn't ready to let that secret out. Not yet. By dawn, when the night gave way to a pale morning sun, the case was closed. But as I sat alone in the precinct, I knew nothing had ended. The man was in custody, but his words chained me tighter than his cuffs ever chained him. The woman was safe, but her revelation imprisoned me in questions without answers. The case was closed on paper, but wide open inside my chest. The official record would call it a success, but the real conclusion was another. That night had changed everything. I wasn't just a cop anymore. I had become a man dragged into an investigation far greater than any I'd ever faced. One not written in reports, but engraved in my own blood. When I finally stored my gear in the locker and adjusted my uniform before heading home, the badge still gleamed in my pocket. But it no longer reflected just authority. It reflected the weight of secrets I never chose to inherit. And at that moment, I understood. Even if the case was officially closed, my life had crossed a line with no way back. Because I hadn't finished an operation. I had opened a door, and behind it, a truth waited. One that promised to change me forever. The case was filed away as another successful operation in the department's statistics. One more line in reports that few would ever read carefully. But for me, it will never be just that. Sometimes, when I close my eyes, I can still feel the cold rain of that night, hear the metallic snap of the handcuffs, see the unsettling gaze of the man who claimed to know my father, and above all, the tearful eyes of the woman who revealed herself as my sister. Every detail etched itself into me like an invisible tattoo, unseen by others, but impossible for me to erase. I've replayed that alley in my mind countless times, searching for meaning, for answers the paperwork never provided. And I realized the true lesson of that night wasn't in protocol, tactics, or procedure. It was something far more human, far deeper. The truth always finds its way to the surface no matter how hard we try to bury it. My father, with all his silences and secrets, may have believed he was protecting me. Maybe he thought giving me only the heroic version of himself would be enough. But fate, or something darker, decided it was time I saw everything. The hero and the man, the light and the shadows. What stayed with me is this. The badge doesn't shield me from life, from being a son, from being human. I learned that being a cop doesn't mean being a machine. The law is written in rigid codes, but life lives in shades of gray. And no matter how much we try to keep the man and the officer apart, there comes a moment when they collide. And the noise of that collision can shake everything you thought you knew. For years, I believed honor meant never hesitating, never letting emotion interfere, never wavering. Now I know honor is facing the truth, even when it hurts. Honor is admitting that the blood running through my veins carries both greatness and mistakes, heroism and silence, and that I don't need to erase the shadows to keep walking forward. I can carry them with me. I discovered I have a sister. I also discovered the unanswered question of who killed my father and why. Those answers remain hidden, and I know one day I'll have to chase them with the same resolve I've chased criminals through dark streets. Until then, I accept the weight of this search as part of my journey. It isn't easy, it isn't light, but it is real. And truth, even when broken, is better than illusion. This isn't a story of victory or defeat. It's one of transformation. I walked into that checkpoint as a cop on another shift. I walked out as a man confronted by his past, his family, and his own identity. I don't yet know where this road will take me, but I know I can't pretend nothing happened. I can't be only the cop anymore. I must also be the son who seeks answers, the brother learning how to exist, the man willing to face whatever comes next. So if there's one final lesson here, it's this. We all have alleys to cross. Some are filled with family secrets, others with professional scars, others with wounds we hide from the world. And when life forces us to walk down them, there's no way around. We either face them or we spend our lives running. I've chosen to face mine. And now I turn to you. Which part of this story struck you the hardest? Which moment made you feel like you could have been in my place? Share it in the comments. I want to hear your voice. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more stories like this. Stories not just about crime and investigation, but about the human heart behind the badge. Because in the end, we're all searching for the same thing. To discover who we really are when the patrol lights fade, and all that's left is the silence of our own truth.